Okay, so today we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit more details of, well, the respiratory system. We're going to talk about some reflexes. We're going to talk about spirographs and spirometry and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and dig right in. So first we're going to talk about why do we have reflexes. So reflexes exist as our neurons. So neurons, they, let's say I touch a hot surface, I touch a hot stove. So when you realize you already touched a hot stove, many times you realize, hey, look, I already put my hands away. That is a reflex. That is an automatic reflex. So many times we have these automatic things that our neurons just kind of immediately do. It's because it's out of protection. So if a neuron senses that we put our hands on a hot surface and then it pulls the hand away, that will be too late. You might be burned already. So instead of telling your brain that, hey, we just got burned, it already pulls it away. So it's the same thing for the respiratory system. We have reflexes to protect our airways, clear some irritants, and maintain homeostasis. So homeostasis is like this state that we're in the human body, that it cannot change too much. So, for example, our temperature should always be somewhere near 37.5. If we go if we go over 40, we're off homeostasis. We're off that balance. So, a common trigger of these reflexes could be irritation, inflammation, or physiological imbalance. So, let's talk about one of the most common ones that we have: coughing. So it's more common when you're sick and you're like, hey, why do I keep coughing? So it's actually because you have irritants in your trachea and your bronchioles and bronchi in your lungs. So when you're sick, you have these diseases. You have this cold. Let's say you have a virus. So this virus is gonna be inside of your lungs. So how you might not be able to feel it because they're viruses. They're really small. However, your body is gonna be able to sense it. They're like, hey, wait, I have this thing that doesn't belong here. I should get it out somehow. So it's gonna try to keep on coughing. So it's try to cough it out. So basically, the mechanics of this is you're gonna take a deep breath and then you cough it out. The glottis closes, and then you have this pulling, which increases pressure. So and then essentially you're gonna go ahead and perform the cough, and then it's gonna blow this air out so that you will. So essentially, what your body is trying to do is that it thinks that if you have such a high blast of air going outside, it should somewhat take away some sort of irritants. For example, if I had this virus and I spit this air out that from the virus place, it should technically bring some virus out along with it, which is usually the case. And that is why, people coughing, it actually spreads the virus. And this air, when it comes out when you cough, it's around 50 miles per hour, which is around 80 kilometers per hour for most of us. We know kilometers rather than miles. So the function basically is to clear the lower airways, otherwise mainly to clear the ways in the lungs, to clear the way in the trachea. Then we talk about sneezing. So cough is coming from the mouth, and sneezing is basically cough but coming from the nose. So this is triggered mainly by irritants inside of the nose, whether it's dust, pollen, or whatever got into your nose. You're like, oh, my nose feels so itchy, I want to cough. So many times that's what happens. So the mechanics is that the soft palate lifts, so your air will go diverts into your nose essentially. And then this forceful expiration will expel so many particles from your nose, up to around 40,000 droplets. So basically, this is how you control the sneeze, the trigeminal nerve to the medulla, and all of that. So the function is to clear the nasal passages so that you have nothing in your nose. And then we talk about hiccups. I talked a little bit about hiccups related to diaphragm and breathing last class, but hiccup is diaphragm spasm. It's basically the diaphragm is tired, just like a muscle spasm. It's tired and needs rest. This mainly is triggered by gastric distension or temperature change. So the mechanics is the diaphragm is really tired, so it just rapidly and it suddenly gonna go back to the rest state, which is gonna be flat, and then it's gonna contract, which causes a quick inhalation. So whenever let's say you're speaking while you're having a hiccup, the sentence gonna be interrupted. You're gonna feel like a breathe and then a breath out. It's like a hic sound. So the glottis slams shut, and that's what makes a hic sound. And the function of this really is potentially none. So when you're eating too fast, you get hiccups because your body kind of feels like, oh, you need to slow down because look, we can't process this entire thing. And then when you're, let's say, when you're drinking too fast or when you're running and talking and drinking at the same time, you're going to have hiccups. So hiccups is just one common thing. It has really no function, but it has an easy solution. So the solution is to drink some water, which basically holds your breath for around 5 to 10 seconds, or vagostimulation. So I personally have never seen somebody get super serious hiccups, but one of my friends that I knew, his uncle, he had a really bad hiccups, and it lasted for, I would say, a couple weeks. So that type of hiccups is unhealthy, and that likely suggests like something like the vagus nerve stimulation. So it's basically a medical treatment that involves stimulating the vagus nerve. So basically, the nerve that connects and controls hiccup, and it signals it with electro impulses to influence the brain activity. So the brain will be like, okay, I think I'm normal now, and then it will stop the hiccup. So regularly, if it's not that serious, breath holding should work for 99% of the cases, but if it's very serious, vagal stimulation. And then we talk about yawning and swallowing. So we don't even know why yawning happens. So many people say if I yawn, a guy randomly is gonna yawn near me if he see me yawn. So yawn is actually triggered by fatigue. It's triggered by brain hyperthermia or social cues. So it's a little interesting on the social cues part. So whenever I see somebody else yawn, it's technically saying that I should probably yawn too. This is because when I see somebody else take a huge breath of air, then I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Well, it's not me voluntarily thinking, but my brain is like, hey, oh, that guy's taking a lot of oxygen. Maybe we should take a lot of oxygen as well. So I will yawn, and then somebody else is also going to yawn, and it's going to be everybody yawning around the same time. So basically, it's a deep inhalation and draw stretch, and then the O2 comes in, which either cools the brain or gives you more oxygen and clears some mucus. So that's what happens. And many people say you can't actually open your eyes during yawning. That is one of the most funny things I've heard. You probably can, but I've never seen it. Then it's swallowing. So regularly when you're swallowing something, it feels a little weird because it feels like you're swallowing this crump of stuff down your body and feels really, really horrible. However, there's involuntary swallowing that occurs sometimes. So when you're choking on something, your body's going to be involuntarily trying to swallow that thing down, push that thing down into your stomach. So it's triggered by stuff in the pharynx. So many times the epiglottis will seal the larynx, which prevents aspiration, and then the entire swallowing happens. So it's gonna prevent the food from going back up unless you force it to go back up. But that is how swallowing works. And then I want to talk about spirometry. So first, we want to talk about what is this. This measures the lung volume and flow during breathing. So you can test this on a spirometer, whether it's digital or mechanical. So it's something that you breathe in it, and it will tell you how good your lungs is, basically. So you're gonna go ahead. If we're supposed to do this in a lab, but we can't do it. So you're gonna take a deep breath, and breathe into this machine, and you're gonna be like, I'm gonna breathe every single air possible. So it's gonna go, and after, so you're gonna take a huge breath, and then you're gonna breathe out all air possible, leave nothing behind, and then it's gonna give out a graph, something like this. So let's see what's on the graph. So first we have the residual volume. This is the volume in your lungs that is never gonna collapse. So basically, there's this amount of 15 milliliters per kilogram of volume in your lungs at all times. Because if they were out, you're dead. unless you're lungs completely collapse, this value is always going to exist. And then these are the expiratory reserve volume. So you can actually breathe them. There's this air that stays in there. You can breathe it out, but you don't usually breathe it out. And then when these two combine together, it's going to become the functional residual capacity. And then we're going to talk about one of the most important things of the tidal volume. So the tidal volume is basically the regular amount where you breathe out. So if you just regularly breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, it should look something like this. And then this is the inspiratory reserve volume. So when you take a huge breath in, you can take a lot of air in. And this shows how much breath you can actually take in. And so these three, expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and inspiratory reserve volume, combined gives you vital capacity. And all of these total, everything here, this is a total lung capacity. And obviously I'm not saying the more the better, but usually if you don't smoke, you should. If you don't smoke, and as a teenager, I would say the lung capacity for around, let's say people is around 16-year-old. So the lung capacity of 16 to 19 years old will be around, for male, 3.4 liters. For female, it will be 2.8 liters. So if you're greatly below average, you should see a doctor. If you're above average, that's pretty good. So usually on the left, you will have a volume, that being liters. And then it's gonna give you, it's gonna be like the vital capacity for a male is, let's say, 400 or 0.5 liters. And then you're gonna graph it out, graph the tidal volume, and then you're gonna like this. The individual has a residual volume of 1,000 liters. Sorry, 1 liter. So it's gonna be around here. So you draw one liters here, and then stuff like that. You can actually draw this out, and you will be requested to draw this out on the actual test or quizzes or exam. So this is something to keep in mind of. And I believe that is the end of this class. Next class, we're gonna talk about diseases of the respiratory system, and also I'm gonna give you guys a gizmo to work on, because I kind of need you guys to do like a fictional virtual lab type of thing, so we can get a little bit more sense of what's happening. And that's it.